Pride Month is here, and given the recent attempt at political erasure of trans people by the government, I thought it important to keep bringing up and appreciating queer characters. Characters whose identity does not begin and end at their queerness. Characters who are more than their stereotypes, who are remembered for their choices, values, actions, and the insurmountable will to keep existing despite what the world may think. A feeling that is perfectly captured by this quote by Bon Clay. One may stray from the path of a man, one may stray from the path of a woman, but there is no straying from the path of a human. You can choose your own life. You may identify as masc or femme or neither or whatever, but it will never make you less of a person. One Piece pushes the belief that existence isn't a crime, and rightfully so. You are always worth it, even if the people around you don't see it. That said, this video is about appreciating the queer themes and characters of One Piece. So I hope you are excited to talk about this queerful world of One Piece with me. There are many anime and manga out there that do have queer or queer coded characters, but none as mainstream as One Piece, and as per my limited knowledge, none are as in your face with it as One Piece, which is why, after years of drought on discussion about the queer characters of One Piece, it is so good to finally see BookTube read this absolute peak of a manga and pick up on such themes and nuances in the recent years. I would like to see Book Talk's take on it as well, but TikTok is banned in my country. Let's start. First of all, Oda is a history buff and clearly does his research, as seen from the references and parallels he draws from the real world, like taking inspiration from real world pirates for characters such as Blackbeard, Eustace Kid, Bonnie, Drake, and more, as well as the burning of the O'Hara Library, which is very similar to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, as well as the Nalanda Library that burned for months, which I might cover in another video. The point of this is that pirates historically always had a lot of queer people. While pirates were known for pillaging and plundering and generally considered awful and merciless, which a lot of them were, however, the monarchies at the time were not any better. Piracy was a way for people to live life on their own terms, especially for oppressed groups like women and queer people, since the social order was dead set on denying their lived reality and hunting them down if they so much as step a toe out of line. Therefore, it is only natural and logical for a manga about pirates and freedom to have queer characters and have them be as loud as possible. Furthermore, none of the queer characters shown are ever seen following government authority or be a part of the government. Bon Clay, the first queer person we see, is working for Crocodile, though he didn't know the identity of Mr. One and also had his own loyal crew. He was basically a pirate working as a bounty hunter. And while Crocodile was a warlord and warlords were considered to be working for the Marines, it becomes clear pretty early on that none of the warlords ever actually listen to the Marines or the world government, and they are there for only as long as it benefits them. When the Straw Hats first meet Bon Clay, they don't know that they are on opposing sides of a brewing conflict and become instant friends, which was surprising for me because Bon Clay was the loudest queer character that I had ever watched on screen, and seeing the protagonist of the story become friends with him without ever even questioning his queerness was absolutely awesome. Then, when Sanji and Bon Clay fight, it is not a bitter fight where the combatants hate each other. It ends in good faith, and Sanji even befriends Bon Clay. After that, Bon Clay even helps the Straw Hat escape Hina by sacrificing himself, and thus made himself a fan favorite, one of the rare few that has no haters. Interestingly, Bon Clay was also the only Baroque Works agent to not have had any real ill will from the beginning as well. The next time we meet Bon Clay is in Impel Down. Luffy has just gone through a rather traumatic event, and if that wasn't enough, he found out his brother is going to be executed and is imprisoned in Impel Down, so he breaks in and has to fight all the way down to level 5 where he believes his brother is being held. He is literally running on fumes and has to do this without his crew by his side. And at such a low point, who does he meet? Who helps him instantly without any ulterior motive? Bon Clay. Luffy hasn't forgotten Bon Clay. Luffy is overjoyed to see him, and the brutality of Impel Down has not made Bon Clay any less loyal to his friend. It has not made him any less queer. And seeing Luffy and Bon Clay hug each other, finally fighting the one person in his hellhole who genuinely is happy to see you, nearly made me tear up. From Bon Clay, we learn about the queen of the Kamabaka Queendom, a leader of the revolutionary army, Emporio Ivankov, another fan favorite with no haters. Like Bon Clay, Ivankov too is not a part of the authoritarian government. Quite the opposite, actually, with its revolutionary connection. Eva is another queer character with the in your face design, and the first time we meet him, we find out that they have made a safe space for and with the other queer people that were imprisoned there. And my media literacy senses tell me that this is not a coincidence. Historically, queer people have always been unwelcome in common places, even in a broken society where the ruling class is constantly oppressing and subjugating the common people. No matter the camaraderie between the oppressed, queer people have never really been welcome even in those spaces and have always had to make safe spaces for themselves. The answer, according to Iva, is to get together and make your own paradise. And can't say I disagree. Seeing Luffy, the protagonist, being helped by them, and Luffy loving and caring for both Bon Clay and Iva, and using the honorific Chan intuitively for them, seemed revolutionary to me. As I mentioned before, there have been queer characters in manga and anime before, but most of the time they are very ambiguous and the audience has to interpret their queerness on their own. And a lot of people use this ambiguity to say that the queer audiences are just projecting onto the characters and they aren't actually queer. Then the purpose of the design becomes to make sure that the characters can't be erased by audience members who find themselves uncomfortable with queer characters. But that is not the case with Bon Clay and Iva. Their queerness is apparent from the start. No one can deny it. Furthermore, we need to consider that with Bon Clay and Ivankov and the other characters with the in-your-face queer design, that even if their visuals are stereotype designs, their characters doesn't lay on negative stereotypes. And I think it is absolutely awesome that the first thing we learn about these characters is their queerness, but it doesn't stop us from learning about them as a human too. So, when the audiences are exposed to the positive aspects of Bon Clay's character, the queerness can't be erased for close minded comforts. If you're going to be a fan of this character, you will be a fan knowing they are queer. And by the end of it, the most important and memorable thing about this character isn't their queerness, but their actions, their choices, the way they held on to their values in difficult times, and how they risked everything to help Luffy. And it is only natural. Queer people in most part of the world are considered outcast, and Luffy, as a pirate and outcast himself, loves these people and their loudness to be themselves and pursue their dreams wholeheartedly. And not just Iva and Bon Clay. All queer characters introduced so far have been well written and plot relevant as well as had a positive relationship with the protagonist. Another thing, both Bon Clay and Iva seem like gender fluid to me, a point supported by how both their devil fruits facilitate changing their body as well as gender anytime and anywhere they wish, though Iva is clearly inspired by Dr. Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror. Still, I have seen people think Bon Clay to be non binary instead of trans or gender fluid. What's your perspective? Let me know in the comments. Speaking of that, a lot of people seem to misunderstand that Sanji hates people of the Kamabaka Queendom. He does not. I understand that the portrayal of Sanji training at Kamabaka land and his interactions with the citizens was weird, and I do think that Oda did mess up handling this more than a little bit. Even if it was just a joke that went sour, the Kamabaka land section did show gay men in a predatory light. My thoughts on this can be summarized by he's a little confused, but he's got the spirit. And the spirit does matter, as when in Whole Cake Island, when Sanji was threatened with taking the life of somebody he cared about, he did consider that it could be someone from the Kamabaka land. I mean, how could you seriously think that Sanji, who was rejected by his father and brothers for how he was born, Sanji, who had such a good moment of mutual respect with Bon Clay all the way back in Alabasta itself, hates queer people? I mean, at this point, just join Toei. Though thankfully the whole Kamabaka thing was a one off, and Oda absolutely did not fumble the handling of queer characters that we meet in Wano. One of the biggest examples of this is Kiku, a samurai who was born male but identifies as a woman. Kiku is seen as a woman by everyone around her. Yes, even Sanji. There are no gags associated with her. She is taken seriously, and there is no malice about her queerness. Moreover, her clothes, her mannerisms, and her appearances are all quite similar to how women of Wano are portrayed. There is even a scene of her being invited to women's bath with everyone. It is done through natural conversation between characters. There is nothing predatory about it, nor is it shown like the cis women are doing a favor to Kiku by inviting her, or being benevolent towards her. It is just a group of women and a couple of girls taking a bath after a hard day of toppling a tyrant and freeing a country. Additionally, a subtle detail that I absolutely love about Kiku's portrayal as a trans woman is how she and Izzo, being siblings, shields her from some transphobic talking points, which would look to erase her trans identity as something of a side effect of dressing like women since childhood. Both Kiku and Izzo are biologically male and were raised to perform while dressed as women, as seen when they meet Odin. But while Kiku eventually came out as a trans woman, Izzo continued to regard himself as a man, all while showing that he is not ashamed of his upbringing, seeing as he still wore lipstick every time we saw him. This shows that Kiku's trans identity doesn't come from how she was raised and is simply who she is. That being said, in addition to Kiku, there is another great portrayal of queer identity in the Wano arc. However, this one is marred in quite a bit of controversy. Yamato. There are a lot of arguments around Yamato, with the biggest one being whether Yamato is a trans man or not. The main reason for such a confusion, I think, is because Yamato does not look traditionally masculine. However, Yamato goes by he him pronouns and calls himself a man. Yamato is not a gag character. He takes his chosen identity as a man very seriously, and so do the other characters and our protagonists. Once Yamato tells someone that he is a man, every character refers to him with he him pronouns. However, despite this, many take Yamato's association with Odin to be a gag, and thus disregard his chosen identity to consider his admiration of Odin so much so that he want to become him as a joke and call him a woman. Even though a lot of trans men have experienced the feeling of admiring a man so much so that they'll realize they are a man as well. While Oda hasn't outright stated Yamato is a trans man, the story and characters in the story have always used male pronouns for him. I think if Yamato was just a little bit more masculine presenting, then arguments about him not being a trans man would be far less. Though that is the thing, isn't it? One Piece is a story about freedom, and queerness is all about embracing who you are inside, regardless of if your body matches your inner self. And even here, a queer person has to fight so hard just to be considered queer because they don't adhere to the stereotypes that people have placed on them. It is just the opposite of Bon Clay and Iowa, isn't it? You couldn't unsee their queerness because of their appearance, and here, because of Yamato's appearance, people are so hesitant to even consider him queer. Whether this was intentional by Oda or not is something I do not know. However, after being a consumer of anime and manga for a while now, in my limited experience, I have seen a disproportionate number of trans women representation as compared to trans men representation. It could be that trans women are just more common in Japan and trans men are a much rarer sight. This is just a hunch and is mostly based on my own experience living in a country where trans women are much more common and visible than trans men. Having said that, one of the funnier evidences of Yamato being a transgender man is with the general Frankie test. In every single piece of One Piece media, from the anime, manga to movies and specials, anytime Frankie whips out his mecha suit, the boys go absolutely ape shit because boys like robots, whilst the girls just go deadpan silent. It's much more apparent in the Fishman Island arc in the introduction of General Frankie when he first brings it out during the fight in Fishman Island, and at the end of the Punk Hazard arc with the giant children, as well as in the One Piece films. There's probably other times as well, and each time, without fail, the guys go crazy for it and the girls just don't. Now, fast forward to Wano, and when Yamato encounters General Frankie, he looks on in absolute wonder. He has stars in his eyes. This is undeniable evidence that Yamato is a transgender man. This was all the major characters that I wanted to cover. So I will give bonus shout out to the girls of Amazon Lily who are no shape or form completely straight, as well as the completely overlooked man in Dressrosa who also fainted seeing Cavendish in the Colosseum. Shout out over. This is the end of this video. Till next time, see ya.